Welcome to the Dental and Mental Podcast. I'm Dr. Galen Dietrich.
I'm Dr. Davina Dietrich.
And we are going to be talking to you about the business and the mindset of dentistry.
It's time to go.
Well, welcome back to the Dental and Mental Podcast. I'm Dr. Galen Dietrich.
I'm Dr. Davina Dietrich.
And today we're going to be talking about part 1 of 6 when it comes to this brand new program that was really your brainchild.
Yes.
That we're both going to be a huge part of. Very excited about it. It's called Next. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what Next is going to be about?
All right. So if you watch the intro to this podcast, that is an insight into what's happening as we take people through Next. So even if you're not joining us for Next, you're going to get a lot of value out of the next 6 episodes of the podcast that we're recording so that you can identify places to really have an incredible 2025.
Yeah.
I feel like 2025 is already, I feel like it's here, even though we're at the tail end of 2024.
Yeah.
There's something really exciting about going into a new year and the idea of possibility and reinvention. And you and I deal in that world, especially with private clients.
Well, I think there's something about just being excited and excitable in general. There's a certain group of people that really get that. And it is what drives them to continually create, to continue to find that next thing that they want to either embody or become or build. And that's a piece of what you and I are feeling, is at the tail end of pretty much every year. We're already asking ourselves, when we talk to Dylan, when we talk to our team, it's like, what do we want to do going into this next year? And we're already planning that Q4.
Yes.
So because you need that momentum going into the next year, all the other things are going to start happening in January, February, and you're going to lose sight of that thing. So now's the perfect time to be excited about it, to be planning it, to get ready.
Okay, so let's talk about what is the difference between the embodiment of Next versus shiny object syndrome. Because as we're talking to people, I think a lot of times people will misidentify shiny object syndrome as their next. And these two things are these two things could not be further apart. Could not be further apart.
Right. Well, my answer would be maturity level. I think it's as simple as that.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is there are plenty of times I can look back in my own life where it was a bright, shiny object syndrome, but I was excited about it. And I was confusing the excitement of just something different than the drudgery that I was experiencing. For example, I think that I got really excited about after my first associateship failed, and you're in this like lull, there were all these possibilities and all these different ideas that started coming to me. And I wasn't really at a level in terms of like clinically even, right? I've been practicing for 1 year. A lot of the ideas that I had, the dreams that I had were so much further than what my skill set was capable of sustaining and stabilizing that most of those ideas, like I'm going to start my own practice and it's going to be amazing and we're going to have all these people coming from all over the place. Like I had to go through some humble pie for years, right? And so the next didn't look nearly as sexy as I thought it was. Like next for me was working in a juvenile detention center in a cinder block walls and treating kids, you know, like with no windows. Like that was my next at that point in time. And it was because of my maturity level that I was putting a lot of these kind of cool, bright, shiny, amazing ideas out there as the next thing I was going to go do, but they weren't actually what was going to get me to where I really needed to go. And so as you mature and as your ability and your skill set and all the other things start to get to a level where you don't have to really think about them anymore, they're there, right? It's just kind of autopilot. I think then next starts to become something that is driven by possibility that is within your grasp. That's not what I was thinking before. How about you? Like, have you ever had those where like it was a bright, shiny object and you really weren't sure exactly how to define that?
Yes. So I think that bright, shiny object looks like you get hot and bothered by it, but it's not something that is going to take you to the next evolution of who you're going to become.
What's it do instead?
What it does is it gets you hot and bothered, and then you go buy something, do something, learn something, but you don't actually change. Like there's no noticeable difference in your life, energy, practice, your physical abilities. There's no evidence of what that thing did for you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that it's really next to me is about an evolution of who you get to become. There's something really special that I think I love about coaching is this ability that people still have to surprise themselves. That's what it feels like when you see, I remember a client, one in particular, when we first started working together, you know who I'm talking about.
I do.
When we first started working together, he had a list of all of these things. I said, okay, write down your list of all the things that you want to become by the time we're done with coaching.
Mm-hmm. So which was like 12 months, right? It was 12 months.
It was, it was a year long that we were with him. And he wrote down all of these things. And it was like, oh my gosh, if I could do this, that would be amazing. If I could have this, and it wasn't tangible things. It was like, if I felt this way, if my confidence was really unshakable, if I could have these conversations with people, if I could control my practice in a completely different way, if I could bring on an associate, if I could train them and start leveraging these different ideas that I have within my business, that would be mind-blowing. So he had this list. It was a really great list. And what was interesting is that all got accomplished pretty quick. And he was a completely different person.
Like 3 to 4 months.
He was a completely different person.
3 to 4 months into it.
He was such a different person that when it was like, okay, now what do you want? He was like, well, did I do what I set out to do? And we got his list back out and he was like, oh, he was so shocked. He was so shocked that everything that he put on his list, he could 100% with clarity and confidence say, oh shit, I did that thing.
Yeah.
I have that thing. I am that thing.
Yeah.
And so I think next means that you have the ability to introduce yourself to a completely different version of yourself. Like if you took a picture of yourself 6 months ago, a year ago, you would look at that picture and not to say that you're like embarrassed by it, but you're like, I don't know him. Or I don't, right? Like there's that like,
yeah,
I don't know you anymore because I am different.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the maturity thing, you know, like just from a biologic perspective, as you mature, you do look at old pictures of yourself and in some ways you're unrecognizable to yourself, you know, because you you look at something from, you and I were looking at photos of us when we first met. And was that like 13, 14 years ago?
Yeah.
I mean, look like kids. Right?
Yeah.
Just like kids. I remember, you know, thinking to myself, like, I remember who that guy was. And that guy couldn't have a hard conversation with anybody. He couldn't stand up to anyone. Like I was an optimist always and there for a good time, you know, trying to, make everyone feel good and make sure I didn't step on anyone's toes.
Yeah.
And I love that. That was great. That was me at that point in time. But as you start to increase in responsibility, whether it's having kids or getting married or having a practice, bringing on associateships, being in charge of a larger team, like there's other skill sets, other abilities that you have to develop and master, and it will change you. And it forces you to change, which is a cool thing. Like you're saying, it opens up a possibility of like, oh my gosh, I'm a different person. That's not hard to me anymore. It's not hard for me to have a hard conversation. You know, I mean, I don't want to have them.
Right.
I'm not saying that that's completely gone.
Yeah.
But that's not something that I have to be afraid of anymore.
Yes.
And how many horizons open for you when you're that way? How many people who wouldn't even give you the time of day who are very successful, but they're looking at you and they're saying, I don't know if I can trust you because you can't have a hard conversation. You can't embody that kind of, responsibility. Now those doors open to you. That's a huge difference in your life. It's massive.
Yeah, right, for sure. I also think there's something really special that happens when you're doing it with somebody, right? So when we're talking about next, we're talking about taking a group of people and doing this with them in 2025. Mm-hmm. So within the coaching container, something incredible happens, which is you have somebody to reflect back to you what it is that you've done. So for the past almost decade, you and I have been working with high achievers in dentistry.
Yeah.
They forget that they can do stuff because they can do it really quickly.
Yeah.
Right. So when I'm talking about this person, that I just got done talking about, he hadn't realized that he had changed so much in such a short period of time until I was like, do you remember this? Do you remember that? We knocked this out. Do you remember how much revenue we generated? Do you remember the associate that you hired? Do you remember all these hard conversations that you had? Mm-hmm. Because high achievers continue to achieve, I think they forget how rapidly it can happen and the specialness that comes along with it because they're so on to the focus and the drive. When they get into that tunnel vision,
yeah,
it's like they forget all the things. It's like, oh my gosh, you're right. Look at what I just did. I think they have really short memories.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the idea is, what are you going to look back on 2025 and say it was the year that you did or became what? And I think even within the context of our business, I was thinking about this because I knew we were going to be recording this podcast. Mm-hmm. I can pinpoint years when something happened that year that was next.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Give me an example.
Okay, 2016.
Yeah.
Right? It was the year that we started our business.
You're 7-8 months pregnant.
Yep. It was, I did a TED Talk. Mm-hmm. There was so much transformation that happened in a really accelerated time frame.
Sold everything we had.
Yep. Where I became a completely different person. I became somebody who was really unattached. Like, don't get me wrong. I love things. Like, yes, I don't want anybody to confuse me for a minimalist. I am as maximalist.
That's not a paper bag she's wearing.
Yeah. I am as maximalist as they come. But I also realized I'm the type of person who will put all chips in. Why? Because I did that year. And it was like a skill that I got where I established enough faith and trust that I have no problem betting it all again.
Well, so you started this out by asking kind of like, what's the difference between being distracted by shiny object syndrome and that thing that truly is your next, that will change, that will actually ask and demand you to change? And I think one of the things that's apparent about that is that the person who understands what next really looks like is the person who values time properly. It sounds cliched, but it is that person who understands that you get one life. You have a limited amount of time. And so when you follow these bright, shiny object syndromes, it's fun for a little bit. It's a dopamine hit. It's the doom scrolling. It feeds you for a moment. But what it actually is doing when you really step back, it's stealing time from you. We have this weird concept, and it's wrong, that if we're not going towards what we want, we're just flatlined. So whenever we're ready, let's go.
Right.
But that's actually not what happens. The more you say no to that thing, the more you hesitate, the more you're afraid, the more you say next year, you actually get further from it.
Oh,
much further from it. And it becomes much harder to get you even back to baseline. And that's true in everything, from finances to running a team to having hard conversations to raising good kids to you name it. And so we have to be honest with ourselves. The next level people know who they are. You know who you are.
For sure. And if you don't know who you are, now's the time to check in and ask yourself if you've been stuck in the same position for how long? Has nothing changed? Or how long have you been telling yourself that something is going to change and it hasn't?
Right.
Right? Because a lot of times, so you and I differ a little bit on time. Right? Like you're like time, like people who really value this, value time.
Yeah.
I think we've talked about this. I don't value time.
You and I are different on time in pretty much every single way there possibly could be.
Yes. So I don't value time very much.
Dylan's nodding his head. He's like, yes.
I just don't look at like time, well, because you hear that so much. It's like time is your most valuable resource. I don't think it is.
What do you think your most valuable resource is?
Energy. Because if I can back something 100 energetically, I can shrink a timeline. And I know that because I have evidence of being able to do that. And I have evidence of being able to do that with clients.
Well, you're 100% right about that. And that's, how do I put this? Okay, so let's back up for a second. A lot of what we are working on in this container for 6 months is multifactorial. We are taking something that is a concrete vision, not just I want to be a stronger leader, because there's nothing concrete about that. That might be the skill set. That might be the person that's required to get there. But there's a real thing that you're going to try to accomplish and actually accomplish.
Yes, because no one's ever come to us to coach to be a better leader.
Right.
Right. No one has ever said, I want to pay you for this. Like literally never happened.
No, it's just that the thing you want means you must become a better leader to do that thing. And so the reason I mention that is that when I'm saying time is so valuable and you say it's energy, it really actually is both, and they're not mutually exclusive.
Agreed.
So for example, I really think you and I were just talking about this. When I'm writing an email or I'm working on a design for something, or I'm writing Dylan and I'm like, hey, I have this idea, it is so much easier for me to condense my timeline if I write it on paper. Pen, paper, I sit down. If I sit in front of a computer, time evaporates and I just can't get it done. Right? So that's a tangible way that you can actually condense timelines, because you start to realize where your energy starts to go. And there is something that is vaporous about being on digital all the time. It just escapes you. And so for me, I know that about me now. I didn't at one point in time, but now I know that. I think you're really masterful at knowing where a person's energy leaks are. That's what makes you so effective.
And we're going to be talking about that in
4, right?
Yeah, I can't remember which episode, but we are going to be talking about.
Yes, we will.
We're going to be talking about the energetic component to shortening timelines. I'm sorry, I am so cold that.
Are you really?
I'm freezing. So if that's coming across in this podcast, it's because it's true.
I am just pleasantly temperate right now.
So that I'm cold. If you're feeling good, I am an icicle. Side note.
Just push through, okay?
Well, I am.
You need to become a warm person for your next level.
Yes, I get that. But if the people are like, why is she chattering? Well, she's like...
Just look at the orange light and be like, fire, fire, fire.
Yeah, I am going to have to like mind trick myself into warmness to be...
Warmness, I love that.
I don't even think that's a word.
I think it's warmth. But we like warmness too.
Yeah, it's warmth. That's right. That's the word. Okay, so people listening to this may not, and it's okay. You may know that you have a desire for what's coming next, and it usually looks like everything is stabilized. So one of the...
It's a very key word.
Yes.
Write that down.
Stabilized, right? So one of the key components with the group that we're taking for 2025 is that you are not struggling with dentistry. It is predictable.
Clinical dentistry.
Clinical dentistry is predictable. You know your stuff. You know it's going to stay. This is not a thing that you're worried about day in and day out. Are my crowns going to fall off? Do I know how to bond? Not to say that there's anything wrong with that. That will come later next year. We will work with that group of people who still have some mastery to do around the clinical skill set, but we are not talking to you right now.
And understand that when Davina is saying there's stability and predictability in your dentistry, it's not that you've accomplished everything you've ever wanted to clinically. It just means that the day-to-day dentistry that you're doing, you don't have to worry about it. You can pretty much do that on autopilot.
Yeah.
So it may be that you have these grandiose goals of doing all X cases and you're not doing that white right now, or full arch dentistry or whatever it is. That's okay. So long as the day-to-day dentistry is predictable, clock in, clock out, not a problem. You don't have crowns falling off. You don't have things debonding. You don't have massive sensitivity issues and patients calling you all the time and your pet's head's falling off. Like that's what we...
Right. You have clinical
stable.
Confidence. Mm-hmm. You have clinical confidence. Yep. You're like, I'm good there. And there are other things that
That's checkmark number 1.
Yes, there are other things that I want to work on. Okay, so tell me your list of some things that you've either identified for yourself or that you've seen in clients that could be next.
These are fun things. I mean, I think that every dentist that I've ever met is going to want at least one of these things I'm about to list. At least one. So it could be something like, I want more time, but I'm not sure how I'm going to get it because I am the sole provider in my practice. Mm-hmm. And so to take care of my team, to take care of my patients, there's no possible way that I can take a day off. I just can't do it, which means I can't travel, which means I can't see parts of the world that I've always wanted to see. I can't give those experiences to my family. And we've been there. We know that.
Absolutely.
Right? We have so many clients, the same thing. They come in like, how do I get out of this rat race? Things are going well. I'm making a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I just can't use it the way I want to.
Right. So
that could be bringing on an associate, right? How do you do that? Well, what is it? I think it's in the first 2 years of associateships, 96% of them fail. That's astronomical.
Right.
So we're looking at a massive failure rate, right? We want to increase time. All right, cool. How are we going to do that? You're going to bring on a person. You're going to stabilize that. There are things you have to look for, and there's things that you have to have systematically to make that happen. It could be that you already have that, and now you're trying to migrate that person into more of an ownership role, a partner. There's a whole part of something there as well. It could be that you want to start lecturing, right? Mm-hmm. Especially with the advent of social media and Instagram being what it is. There's really, I think, a desire in all of us to share our knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so there's lots of ways of doing that. You've talked about this. It can be lecturing from the stage. It can be building a course. It can be being a keynote speaker somewhere, right? It could be getting into a peer-reviewed journal. Right? Inside Dentistry, JCD, you name it. You start going down the list of like things that it would be just fun for you to take a case, to document it well. It's a challenge. It's a massive challenge. You know that 40,000 people are going to be reading that. Well, okay, that definitely ups the ante.
Yep.
So those are things that a person who has predictability in their practice and things are stable, there's a next level. And you may not know the people that you need to know. You might not have the right network. You might not have the right mindset or attention to detail for creating something like those things. You may not have any clue how to start a course or how to build that. You might not have any clue how to find the right person to bring into your practice, what you should be looking for in a partner, what you should not be looking for, wealth and building true lasting wealth and investment. Like there's so many things that a person get excited about that are next levels.
Yeah.
Those are just a few of them for me. What would you add?
So yes, that and the excitement around building that custom is what I get really excited about, right? So to your point of partnership, when we've worked with people who are like, okay, this is something that I want to do, it's like, okay, how do we have a good time doing that? What is the ideal person that we're looking for? How can we make this a win-win? What does that conversation look like? How would we headhunt that person, right? Do you have an idea of what that person looks like, how you want to interact with them?
Yeah.
It can look like the team. Sometimes it's like, you know what, my practice is doing great. And I kind of realize that the team can be a suck, right? The team can be a suck. And that's just
a total zero.
Yeah. And that's just the truth. So sometimes the next level, always actually, spoiler alert, it requires you to release some old stuff. And it doesn't mean that you cut people off and like start from ground zero. It doesn't have to include any of that. But there is a realization that happens where it's like, oh, this is where I'm going. And having some of those conversations where it's like, do you want to come to this next place with me?
Right.
Right? And some people may be like, no, I don't want to do that. And it's like, okay, that's fine. Who do I need on my team? Who do I need to become? What is it that I actually want to build? And that's a really fun conversation to have because when you think about it, there's not a lot of places where you get to have that conversation as an adult.
Yeah.
Usually it's like, okay, well, kind of the course is set. I guess I'm just going to be on this path forever. And this is what I'm saying about the ability to surprise yourself. I don't know if I want to talk about this personally because I haven't done anything yet, but I have something big that I have plans for that's going to require a lot of investment, a lot of training. I'm really excited about it. So that's probably some steps ahead, but I'm already having conversations with people who know a lot more about that area than I do and getting that lined up.
You probably share it with people in Next.
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah. In the group, I'll talk about it, but I'm not going to talk about it on the podcast because I don't know you guys yet.
Awesome. You know what? I'll add this one. There's another interesting one. This is one that almost every dentist I know comes to this place. And it's a place where you do all this general dentistry because that's what your patients sort of require. That's what the patient pool needs at some point in time. And then as you get bigger and bigger and you grow in your predictability and in your reach and demand, there becomes this kind of irking desire to narrow your focus and to do more of the things on more of the people that you enjoy.
Absolutely.
Versus just doing anything and everything that people are asking you to and filling your schedule with things that you're like, I guess I have to say yes to this because people need it. And so that may involve bringing on an associate. That's one possibility, sure. It also might just mean that you're saying no more, right? You're creating and developing more of a niche style practice. And so I think that's one that a lot of people can get excited about. And if you're a dentist listening to this and any of those things that we've said, or you're like, yeah, my predictability in my dentistry is great. I feel stable there. And one of those 12 things you just mentioned, or 5 of them, are things that I've been like thinking about. And I just don't know how I'd do it.
Right.
I don't know how I'd find the time for it. I don't know how to find the money for it. I don't know how to find the people for it, the team for it, et cetera, which we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Boom. Like it's calling to you.
It's
right?
so exciting too. I had, as you know, I had a root canal a couple months ago and obviously
I did not do it.
Right. No, I went to the endodontist. So obviously a specialist, but the vibe of the practice, I was like nailed, absolutely nailed it. Like the music was good. The team was good. We were running on all cylinders. Like as a patient having that experience, I was like, shout out to Dr. Palermo.
That's right, Marcus.
It was just a 10 out of 10 experience. Yeah, it was great, right?
Yeah.
So I loved that because when you can see somebody in their zone of genius and they're doing it well and they've curated the experience that they want that client to have, I really felt it.
Yeah.
Weird to say, but
which is another thing to want, right?
Weird to say, but that was an enjoyable root canal. Even the post-op was great, right?
You're describing how often does that get thrown around? The patient experience. But very, very, very few practices actually have that.
Yeah.
It is a hard thing to do.
Well, and this is what I do, right? So I wasn't going in ready to give 10s across the board.
No. Tough sell.
Right? But by the time I was done, I was like 10 out of 10.
When you have it, you have it. And it's for everything from music to artwork to people to flow to design to brand, right? And so many of those things have to be, they all have to be going right. And it also has to look effortless. It has to look like you've been doing this for like it's just you. You exude this thing.
Absolutely.
You're not trying, you're not posing. It's not, it just is what it is. And so that might be something that you're really wanting as well. It could be that that's your next.
Okay, so
right?
what is it for you?
Oh, it is a lot of things.
Well, anything that you're willing to share with the people.
Well, does the set look any different, guys?
Yeah, if you guys tune in regularly, we're in a new space.
We're in a new space. Yeah, it's I get done with things. I think you're the same way. Dylan's the same way. When you're creative and you're moving through things, there's always another level. And I think the key piece for me has been stabilizing that first level, that I'm at, doing that first as a priority. And I think that's not for any other reason than we are always going to get bored before the level's done. And this almost always happened. You'll be on this level, and before you've finished it, you get bored. Yeah. Why? Because that last section,
the last 20%.
That's where you learn something you were supposed to learn in that. And it was easy here, but that is where you have to really push. And you push and you find something special in that area. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm learning to do. And in that area right now, I actually have a lot more clarity where I actually would have chosen a different next if I was in this 80%. But that 20 has informed now where I want to go. So I actually want to be writing more articles because I love the challenge of curating a story. I'm just going to say it. I think most journal articles in general fall prey to being boring as shit.
I think we have that as an industry problem.
As an industry. Yeah, our courses are, marketing is, podcasts are. I'm sorry. Dentistry is boring. It's boring. It's so freaking boring.
Yeah, I agree.
And you fall into one of two camps. Either you're boring and traditional, or you are really full of yourself. And it comes across. And you're like, you're just here to make me praise you. And I'm like very convicted of just making dentistry really fucking fun again. Like it should be fun. It should have punch.
Why do we do this?
Because it makes me happy and makes you happy.
We have a good ass time. Like we do this because we have a good ass time.
That's why. If you were to boil down what we're about, it's just making dentistry not suck again.
I was saying making dentistry fun again, but I for a lot of people it never was. So I mean,
yeah,
strike again.
Strike again. That most of my necks are about taking facets of our field and putting us all over it. For no better way of putting it, it's like the way we practice, the way we speak, our podcasts, our marketing, the way we work with Dylan. It's like just making a splash, man. I want to make a splash everywhere because I think that people are trapped in sort of this almost like platonic cave, like Plato's cave style where you're chained, you're in a matrix. It's like everyone's waiting for that red pill of permission. Like, just go be you. Go have a good time.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Make the world yours.
Right.
And so that's what I want to do.
Well, because to your point, everybody's waiting to be tapped on the shoulder by somebody to be given permission to do whatever it is that they want. Yeah. This is the dink, dink, dink. Right? This is, this is your tap, guys. This is your tap.
It's time to get going.
Right. Yeah. You have to elect yourself to the promotion.
Well, it's also kind of what we say to patients all the time. You guys, I'm sure have heard this. The patient comes in and they say it's too expensive. And one of the things I'll tell them, I said, it'll never be cheaper, faster, or more painless than right now. It won't. It's only going to get harder. It's only going to get more or less predictable. It's only going to get more expensive. And it's only going to take more of your time.
Yeah.
So how does that relate? If you're at this place right now and you're like, I know what my next is, or at least I have like a smell of it, a scent. I kind of have an idea of where I think I need to go. Then you just need to say yes, because you won't know the rest of it.
Yeah,
you don't get to know the rest of it.
Right. You don't even need to know what next is. You just need to know that you want it.
You just have to get going.
Can you ask me back?
I love it. What you said.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for asking.
So glad this is a give and take.
Well, there is a point to that.
Yeah. What do you see as your next?
Well, I just signed on to work with a new mentor.
Yes.
And I have no idea what I'm doing. Right. I have no idea what I'm doing. The opportunity presented, and to the point of this podcast, I knew it was a yes. I don't actually know what I'm going to be doing in that container just yet. Tell
the people how long it took you to make the decision.
Like what? A minute? I already knew.
Where is the Amex?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I already knew. And it was like, I had to get on a phone call and make sure that it was a fit and all of this and that and the other. And the truth was, it was like, I already knew. I know what I need to do. The idea isn't flushed out completely, but that is the point of having a mentor, is that the flushing out of the idea and the work on the idea is what I will be doing with my new mentor.
Yeah.
Right. So I didn't need to know. I just needed to get myself into his world. And now we're starting to build, and it's something that I'm really excited about. And people will see the fruits of that eventually.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, right? I didn't have a 10-step plan that I went into it with. It was yes, and let's go.
And wouldn't you agree? I mean, kind of in on this as kind of our part one, but I think if you're on our email list, you read this in one of the last emails, but it's the idea that the reason why the clinical dentistry to us was one of the very first check marks you had to have, that predictability and stability, is that it's a control. If you think about any of the things that we mentioned as potential next, the control in the equation is your dentistry. Like whether you get an associate or you get a partner or you go and put your stuff all over the internet and market crazy and create demand, or you decide to go more niche, or whatever it is, the dentistry stays the same. Your predictability stays the same. The variables are all the things that come and are demanded of you when you say yes to that next thing. And so you actually physically can't know. That's why it's called a variable.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what you as a Sherpa, as it were, right? And a guide and a coach and a mentor, that's your job. Your job is to absorb that fear, hesitancy, and worry over the variables and say, I'm going to guide you through that. And we're going to solve for X and Y. And we're going to give you this result. We're going to have an answer to the equation.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the beautiful things about a container like this. The focus is so narrow on who you need to become, and you're going to become that person.
Yep.
Period in a story.
Yep. So the first month, that is what we're going to be working on. And so throughout the 6 months of the program, we're going to be working on something different every month. The first month is identifying next.
Mm-hmm.
And so the podcast series is also going to follow that. So we're going to be doing a series of 6 episodes on the podcast, and we're going to be walking you through those pieces. So if somebody is like, is this for me? Is this not? Keep listening to the podcast, and we're going to give you the lay of the land for each month that we will be covering in next. So the first month is identifying next. So if you've heard this podcast and you're like, I know that there's something there for me, get yourself in.
Yeah. Be a Davina. Take 1 minute.
Yeah, but
seriously, I mean, don't waste time.
No, I just don't see why you would. So that I can call you up in 10 years and be like, hey, I'm still in the same place. I wish I would have done this 10 years ago. What is that? Like plant a tree 10 years ago or plant it today?
Something like that.
Yeah.
The best day to plant it was 25 years ago.
Yeah. And if you didn't, then the second best day is today.
And then you're too late.
Right.
Then you're Tyson trying to fight. Maybe just stop.
We feel differently on that. Good for him getting in the ring.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Okay. Jump into part 2.
Yeah.
Part 2. Let's do it.
Okay. All right. Well,
see you there.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for listening and or watching the Dental and Mental podcast. If you enjoyed this episode or any others for that matter, feel free to tap that subscribe button on YouTube, Apple, Amazon, as well as Spotify. While you're there, why not leave us a review, up to 5 stars? And if you're on YouTube, go ahead and leave us a comment. Let us know what topic you want us to discuss next.
If you like what you heard today and you want to be involved in the Thrive world, from coaching to courses or just to connect with us, go to thethrivedentist.com.